Hey everybody, Hoosier Jedi here with another review for you. This time I'm going to be talking about episode 9 of season 2 of Game of Thrones called Blackwater. Now this is not the season finale, but if you're like me, this is the episode that you've been looking forward to all season. Not only is this one written by the man himself, George R. Martin, not only does it contain the Battle of Blackwater, one of the absolute most exciting and best scenes in the early part of the series, and honestly the series as a whole, I think. But it's also the episode where they blew the majority of season two's budget, and boy, does it show. But anyway, let's get into this. Let's start getting into things. But before we get to that, I have to give the usual disclaimers. I have read all the books, but it's been more than a year since I read A Clash of Kings, so if I forget some details or if I get showing book continuity mixed up a little bit, please forgive me. Also, I'm probably going to be talking about some stuff that happens in the books. I will try not to spoil anything huge from the books, but if you don't want to know anything about what's happening there, then back out now because I probably will talk about some of the smaller details. So anyway, let's hop right into it, and first of all, talk about the really big thing here that I've already mentioned is the special effects here. I really don't know what I can add to what's already been said by other people. This really was, especially of course, the big huge fireball that destroys the fleet. Motion picture quality CGI, honestly, motion picture quality, everything in this episode. It was just, I mean, phenomenal. Phenomenal. As I said, they did blow the majority of season two's budget on this episode, but wow, talk about money well spent. Now, as for the changes from the book, there's just so much that is different. I really could talk for a really long time about all the little changes and details here. But honestly, I don't really think that's necessary. I know I know there are other people who are going to go into exacting detail of every little change that's happened. So I'm going to let them go to it, and instead I'm going to focus about what I tend to usually talk about, which is the characters and what's going on with them. So let's dive right into that, and let's start off with good old Davos talking with his son at the very beginning of this episode. And here, of course, we see the veteran warrior. I think is a fair description of Davos. He wasn't really a soldier as much as he was a smuggler, but he's the experienced man, the man who understands, who has seen war and understands what's coming. His son is there, full of courage, full of determination, full of religious fervor, who thinks that just his emotions are all that he needs, his emotions and his courage to carry the day to win a glorious victory. So it is the clash between young and old, between father and son, between the experienced veteran and the naive rookie. And well, we see quite clearly how well that ends for the naive rookie. And yeah, bummer for Davos, but sadly, Davos's hard times are not coming to an end. But even so, even though we do only get to see Davos very briefly, everything that we see from him really is just absolute gold for his character. And I would really consider, even though this season is not over with yet, I really do have to think that Davos is the standout new character this season. So lots of credit to everybody involved in making that happen, the writers and of course our the esteemed actor, whose of course name I cannot remember because I can't remember anyone's name. It's a wonder I can remember my own name really sometimes. But anyway, let's move on and talk about Tyrion. The Battle of Blackwater is quite easily, in the entire series, one of Tyrion's great shining moments. And oh wait, Peter Dinkley. Yes, I can remember his name. No, seriously. How could you forget Peter Dinkley's name? He's that awesome. Everything that Tyrion does, he is just shining. He is everything that you could really want in this situation. He's got the strategy. He knows how to be a leader. He is, and he is, of all people, the dwarf, the imp, the guy that everyone mocks and has mocked his whole life. He is the one who rallies the men into the final charge. And at the very end of all, they're chanting, half man, half man. And it is truly a glorious moment. Not that it lasts, of course. Things definitely do take a turn for the worse. And again, I was really pleased that they didn't. Well, obviously they couldn't really let us step into Tyrion's thoughts as to what was going on there in that final scene with him. But he did pick up. He's probably going to have a little. Well, actually, not a little at all. Scar next season, which is going to be very different, of course, in the books. I'll spoil this for you. He's loses a good chunk of his nose and is maybe not quite disfigured, but he's certainly uglied up quite a bit. Now, of course, they can't chop off a little piece of good old Peter Dinkley's nose, so I don't mind this change. It's just a sheer practicality of the fact that you're dealing with a living human being here. And honestly, Tyrion's really not going to be that different if he just has a rather prominent scar than if he was, had his entire face messed up. Although I guess we won't be seeing his rather Jack Nicholson Joker sort of scene from after Tyrion recovers from that battle. I thought that part in the book where he goes, "Pretty." Yeah, I thought that was just both creepy and hilarious, to be perfectly honest. But speaking of Tyrion, it was very nice to see him have that scene with Shay where you can see the genuine fear in Tyrion. And it speaks so well of their relationship that Shay is the one person in all the world that Tyrion can really confess that he is afraid to. She is the one person he can bring himself to be genuinely, emotionally vulnerable with. And I really do like what they are doing with Shay. They are going in some ways rather a different path than what she got in the books. I don't really mind this because, I had some quibbles with. I guess quibbles isn't exactly the word. Let's just say that ultimately I was unsatisfied, in some ways disappointed with what happened to her character ultimately as things go on. And any more than that, I really can't say because it would spoil some pretty important things from the book. But yeah, I have to give them credit for making Shay, I think, a much more vivid, much more involving character. I'm much more interested in what's going on with her as a character by herself. Where in the books I was just sort of interested in her as it relates to her relationship with Tyrion. So let's move on to talk about another Lannister. I am speaking, of course, of Lancel. No, actually, what the heck? Since I was actually going to plan on mentioning him, but let's do it. I was going to mention him later, but let's do it now. For a guy who spent most of this season being everybody's toy or punk or whatever, I got to give some credit to Lancel. When I first saw him get hit with that arrow, I thought he was going to turn tail and run. I really, really did. But amazed to my own surprise, and to what I'm sure was the surprise of many of the other viewers out there, Lancel, mans up. He insists on taking Joffrey back to the battlefield. And he even stands up to Cersei to say, no, the king has to go back out there to return boost the men's morale, or we are all screwed. Now, of course, Cersei literally takes him down in one hit, but gee, give the man credit. He showed more guts than the freaking king did. But then, so did Sansa. So did Shay. But we'll talk more about Sansa in a little while. Let's keep talking about Lannisters. Let's talk about Cersei. When I think, like most people, when saw Cersei get the potion early on from the Maesters, of course we all knew it was poison, and like a lot of people, I was assuming that it was intended for her should things go south. well, go south even more than they already had. And I was reminded a lot of, oh gee, what was it? It was some movie or TV show set in Roman time. Rome, yes. It was an episode of Rome where a great house was. I'm sorry if I forget the details. It was a great house was about to fall, and one of the Roman guys took some poison rather than die and fall into the hands of his family's enemies. That's what I was thinking of. And by the way, Rome is a great show. You should definitely check it out if you ever get the chance. Anyway, so that's what I was thinking there with Cersei. And of course, the poison turns out not to really have been for her, but to be for Tommen should the worst happen. Now, I'm a little unsure as to why, and maybe this was remarked upon in the books. I probably don't remember, as to why she thought that Stannis would kill Tommen but spare Sansa. Now, granted, Sansa is the daughter of Stannis' brother's friend. She was the daughter of the guy who said, "Okay, look, Robert's gone. Stannis has the right to be king." So, I guess if I think about it, it does make sense why Stannis would be willing to spare Sansa. But it's sort of, I think, would really hurt his claim to the throne if he goes and murders Tommen, who is his innocent nephew. Now, Joffrey, of course, needs to go. It makes perfect sense for Stannis to kill Joffrey, and to a degree, it certainly does make sense to get rid of Tommen by thus extinguishing his brother's line, except for Marcella. Can't remember actors' names. Can't remember characters' names. Ah, man. I guess it's probably not a surprise if I tell you that I have trouble remembering birthdays too. But anyway, let's continue on with that. So I can understand why Stannis would want to kill Tommen, but I just think doing that would really, kind of hurt his claims. It hurts his, I don't know if legitimacy, but his moral credibility. As he said, Joffrey is a thief. And in Stannis' view, that is not an unjustifiable position to take. But to kill his nephew, who's only like about 10 years old, just to secure his line, I don't know. That just speaks of a very bad moral choice. Not that I really think that a bad moral choice would stop Stannis, but let's just say that I think that would be considered pouring blood, the blood of an innocent, on his claim. Now again, that's probably not going to stop Stannis, but it's something that politically could hurt him down the line. Not that I think Stannis is thinking about that. So anyway, let's talk about Stannis, since I keep talking about him. His little line where he talks about how thousands of his men are going to die. You know, there is that old saying that one death is a tragedy, a million deaths is a statistic. And it kind of looks like Stannis subscribes to that theory. On the other hand, you have to give Stannis an enormous amount of credit. This guy is a man who is perfectly willing to lead from the front. He is literally the guy who is leading the charge. And he sees his own men getting cut down and dying around him. That poor guy who was just a few feet from him getting his head bashed to pulp by a rock. Whew! Man, but Stannis does not blink. He does not stop. He literally has to be dragged out of there by his own men when Tywin and the rest of the Lannisters and was it Sir Lawrence who also shows up? So whatever flaws he might have as a man, even if he is apparently willing to kill children to get the Iron Throne, you cannot say that Stannis Baratheon is a coward. He is a man of extraordinarily impressive courage, if nothing else. So, as long as we're talking about the folks in King's Landing, I guess we might as well talk about Sansa. Again, we're seeing more of her sort of taking a few steps onto that path that Cersei seems to be pushing her on. Her trying to manipulate Joffrey into heading to the front lines to get himself killed. Of course, even she doesn't seem to believe that that'll work because, as she said, the worst ones always survive. And it is very fun to sort of watch those scenes between her and Cersei. Cersei acting as the evil mentor. I picture Cersei's kind of being like, what if the Wicked Witch, the evil queen, well, Cersei is in fact the evil queen, were to be, rather than trying to kill Snow White, she tried to corrupt Snow White. And that just seems to be such a perfect description of the Cersei Sansa dynamic. Cersei as the evil mentor. And she even flat out says to Sansa this episode, "You should be willing to sleep with guys to get what you want." And it is, I think, more than a little ironic. And this is actually one of my favorite parts of the Cersei's overall story in the books was, as much as she loathed Robert, especially his drinking, his drunkenness, and the way he would become when drunk, as time wears by, Cersei becomes more and more bound to the bottle. And here we see that illustrated quite perfectly as she's just boozing it up, doling out all this horrible and evil advice to Cersei. You know, like your aunt who gets hepped up on a little too much sherry at Christmas time and starts going around telling everybody how they're living their lives wrong. And no, I am not drawing upon my real life for that at all. My aunts are all very nice ladies who don't drink. No, seriously, I'm telling the truth. They're both very nice ladies. Anyway, let's continue on. Talking about Sansa, we have her extraordinarily bizarre relationship with the Hound. Honestly, in the books, I didn't particularly like their scenes together, just because in the books the Hound creeps me out so much more than he does here on the TV show for some reason. I guess just having an actor and having a real face that I can put to him makes it easier for me to empathize with him. But whenever they were talking in the books, and it's still present here in the TV show, just not as strongly, I always felt like their conversations could just flat out go from talking to rape at just any second. But yeah, so that's one of the reasons why I just don't particularly care for the scenes for them, and that is sort of something I feel conflicted about because those scenes are the ones that always shine the strongest light on Sandor as a character, and tend to make him a much stronger character because Sansa, for whatever reason you want to attribute their strange relationship, is the one person that he does seem to form any kind of real emotional connection to. And I have to admit that is certainly very interesting, and it certainly makes for some very good storytelling and a really very strong scene. With him offering to take her home to Winterfell, that does show that for whatever he says about how much he enjoys killing, that there is some small spark of compassion still left in the Hound, which does sort of play, I think, into some of the things that ultimately end up happening with his story. But I can't really remark on that too much without spoiling some really major stuff. But it really was great to see him have that scene with Bronn, although I'm not exactly sure why it was that he felt the need in that particular circumstance to more or less go and pick a fight with Bronn, which, considering what was getting ready to happen, seems like about the worst idea in the world. But I guess we all have our own ways of blowing off steam. And it certainly was very, very interesting, very human moment to see him get freaked out by the sight of that guy on fire. And I like how there are no words, no exposition. It doesn't need to be spelled out for us. I hate shows that feel the need to spoon feed me every little thing, as if I, as a reasonably intelligent adult, can't put two and two together. I know why the Hound is freaked out by fire. His brother shoved his head into a fireplace and burned half of it off when he was a kid. I don't need to be told that. I've been watching this show. I can figure it out myself. But anyway, after that, of course, we get what has to be, in my mind, quite possibly the greatest I quit scene in all of television history. The part where he just tells Joffrey and everybody else what they can do with themselves, that was really just a thing of beauty. Someone's been needing to say something like that to Joffrey for so long, and I was thrilled to see it finally happen. Oh, and yeah, to step back for a moment to talk about Sansa, another thing that I have to give her credit for is the way she sort of steps in here and acts really the way a queen should. She does what she can to comfort the obviously and very reasonably terrified women around her. And I think that does speak well for her character growth this season. Sansa, honestly, out of everybody in the cast, is one of the characters who, while she does grow, she does change, she does, in her own ways, become stronger over the course of the series. She's the one who I think is the slowest for it to happen to. And it's not to say that her character doesn't go in interesting directions, particularly by the end of the fourth and fifth books. There's some really very interesting stuff going on with Sansa that I wish we'd gotten to see more of. But, actually, yeah, I think that pretty much makes my point entirely. Anyway, let's see, what else? Well, I don't really think that I can comment again about the battle too awful much. It was, as I said, just absolutely phenomenal, just utterly spectacular. And it was, the good old fashioned, the cavalry arrives, it saves the day at the end. It's a little bit cliche, but here it did feel very satisfying, and it is kind of odd that after everything that's happened these last two seasons, at the end of it all, we're left cheering, or at least I was, for the Lannisters, for Tyrion Lannister of all people. Because for all their flaws, Cersei and Tyrion and all those other people that are in King's Landing, they don't deserve to die the way that they would have if Stannis had won the day. And oh yeah, before I go, there is one other thing that I did want to speak on. It was Varys. His scenes with Tyrion continue to be some really just highlights. The chemistry between the fellow that plays him and Dinkley is just absolutely amazing. I love watching those two guys bounce off each other. And when he remarks about asking if Tyrion was aware of how it was that he becomes a eunuch. Now, I know the story from having read the books. And yeah, I mean, it's a pretty freaky story. And the way he talks about it, well, he doesn't even talk about it. The way he talks about Stannis and the way that Stannis has allowed himself with Melisandre and these darker powers that she serves. It's all so incredibly subtle. It's all in the actor's face and tone of voice, and he just sells it so well. Now, of course, as I said, I understand what Varys' story is, why he is so freaked out by Stannis and Melisandre and all of that other stuff. So, obviously it hits me a lot harder than it would maybe someone who is not familiar with that particular information. But folks, I got to tell you, if you don't know what is going on with him, definitely stay tuned because it's a tale to hear. And speaking of things to hear, at the very end of it all, we actually get to hear what the song "The Rains of Castamere" sound like. Now, this song is mentioned repeatedly in the books, and I honestly sort of tended to gloss over the singing parts. Probably just a remnant of what happened when I tried to read the first Lord of the Rings book. I got like about 1/3 of the way through that book, and I like, oh my God, Aragorn is singing a song right now? Okay, yeah. And I never did go back and finish that book. Yeah, I know. I'm weird like that. I just do not like singing in books. But anyway, overall, this is truly an absolutely, to use the word again, phenomenal episode. This, I think, no matter what they do in the next episode, is bound to be the absolute highlight for season 2. And certainly this is going to be one of the all-time highlights for this series as a whole. So I cannot. There really are no more words for just how completely awesome I think this episode is. But anyway, folks, that's all I really have to say. So, as always, please comment, rate, and subscribe. You can, of course, follow me on Twitter as Hoosier Jedi. And until next time, take care and have a good one.